The courtroom was silent, a tense and heavy atmosphere hanging in the air. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it had ever before, marking the passing seconds as all eyes turned toward the man at the center of the room. Jonathan Harris, a billionaire with vast power and influence, sat in his chair, his face pale, his palms sweaty. His attorney, the one man he had trusted to protect him in the battle of his life, had just walked out. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and no patience for theatrics, glanced over her spectacles at Harris. "Mr. Harris," she said firmly, "your attorney has left the courtroom. We will continue without him." The words hit Harris like a cold wave. His heart raced, his breath shallow, and he could feel the weight of every stare in the room, the judgment from those around him. His entire empire, built over decades, now rested on the shoulders of a single moment. The billionaire was alone. The courtroom murmured, a hum of disbelief spreading among the spectators. He could hear the whispers of the press, the skeptical glances of the jurors, and the subtle chuckles from his adversaries. Harris had been accused of embezzling funds, and the evidence was stacked against him. But he had money, he had power, and he thought he could buy his way out of anything. That was until his lawyer had turned his back on him. The reality was crashing down on him in a way he never expected. The man who had once dismissed the concerns of others as insignificant now found himself without a defense. As the judge prepared to call for a recess, a figure in the back of the room caught Harris's eye. A young woman, dressed in simple clothes, standing at the back of the courtroom. Her name was Maya Williams, and she had been working in the building as a janitor for the past few months. Maya had seen the rich and powerful come and go, but she had never been part of their world. She was just a worker, a servant, someone who cleaned the offices and hallways while the elite made their deals in rooms she would never enter. But today, something was different. Maya had been listening to the proceedings from the back of the room, trying to stay out of the way, when she overheard something. She had heard the lawyer's words before he left. "You are beyond saving." It was the final straw for Maya. She had seen enough. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she moved down the aisle. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. The judge raised an eyebrow, and a murmur spread through the crowd. Who was this woman, and why was she interrupting the trial? Harris, still in a daze, watched as Maya approached the front of the courtroom. Her eyes were steady, her posture straight, as if she were prepared for what was coming next. She stood in front of the judge, and with a calm voice, she spoke. "Excuse me, Your Honor, but I believe I can help," she said. The room went dead quiet. The judge blinked in surprise, and the courtroom erupted into whispers. The tension in the air was palpable. Maya, the janitor, was now standing at the front of the courtroom, in the middle of the highest-stakes battle of Harris's life. It was impossible. It was unexpected. But it was happening. In the midst of the heavy silence, Maya Williams stood tall at the front of the courtroom, her heart racing, but her resolve firm. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room upon her, their judgment like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. The murmurs among the spectators grew louder, but she didn't flinch. She had come here for a reason. She had heard enough to know that what was happening wasn't right. She was no lawyer, no expert in the law, but she knew something that could turn the tide. She had spent months cleaning the offices and hallways of this building, overhearing conversations that weren't meant for her ears. She had seen the powerful people who walked through these doors, who held the lives of others in their hands, and she had learned more about their world than she ever wanted to know. But today, it was her turn to step into that world. Today, it was her turn to make a difference. The judge, still processing Maya's sudden interruption, looked over her glasses, her sharp eyes scanning the young woman before her. "You believe you can help, Miss Williams?" she asked, her voice cool but with a hint of curiosity. Maya nodded, her voice steady as she spoke. "Yes, Your Honor, I believe I can." There was a long pause as the judge considered this. The courtroom was still, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her composure. She wasn't about to back down now. "Proceed," the judge said, her tone skeptical but allowing. Maya took a deep breath, then turned to face Jonathan Harris, the billionaire who had been abandoned by his lawyer. His eyes were wide with shock, but there was a flicker of hope in them now. He wasn't used to being looked at like this, like he wasn't above everyone else. But there she was, a simple janitor, about to challenge the system that had always worked in his favor. Maya began to speak, her voice calm but carrying authority. "I overheard your lawyer say that you were beyond saving, Mr. Harris," she said, her gaze steady on him. "But what he didn't know, and what the court doesn't know, is that there's a piece of evidence, something that could turn this whole case around." The room went still as everyone processed her words. A low murmur spread through the crowd, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. Jonathan Harris blinked, his mind racing. How could this woman, a janitor with no legal background, possibly know something that his top lawyer had missed? "What evidence are you talking about?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Maya didn't hesitate. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This document," she said, holding it up for everyone to see. "It's a clause in the merger agreement, the one your lawyer didn't even look at. If this clause is presented, the entire case against you falls apart. Your company's financial records will be exonerated, and you'll walk out of here free." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Some gasped, others leaned forward in disbelief. The judge raised her hand to restore order. "Order in the court," she commanded. But even she was intrigued now, her curiosity piqued by this unexpected turn of events. Jonathan Harris felt a sense of disbelief wash over him. A janitor had just stepped forward and claimed to have found something his lawyer had missed, something that could change everything. The world he had built, the empire that had seemed so unshakable, now seemed fragile, like a house of cards teetering on the edge of collapse. He looked at Maya, his eyes searching for any sign that this was a trick, but there was none. She was sincere, determined. "How did you find this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya didn't look away. "I clean these floors every day, Mr. Harris. I've seen documents, overheard conversations. I may not know everything, but I know enough, and I know that this clause could save you." She looked at the judge then, her gaze unwavering. "I may not be a lawyer, but I know what's right, and this is the right thing to do." The judge's eyes narrowed as she considered Maya's words. She had no legal training, but she had just revealed something the courtroom had missed. The idea that a simple janitor could uncover such a critical detail was almost laughable, but in that moment, it wasn't. Maya had just done something that no one else in the room had. She had found the key to unraveling the case. The judge nodded slowly. "Mr. Harris," she said, her voice firm but not unkind, "your case is not lost yet. We will review this document, and until then, the trial will be adjourned." As the courtroom slowly emptied, Maya stood there, the weight of what she had just done settling in. She had faced down the powerful, the rich, and had done what no one else had the courage to do. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had finally made a difference. The next morning, the courtroom was buzzing with anticipation. Word had spread quickly that Maya Williams, the janitor who had uncovered a crucial piece of evidence, had disrupted the entire course of the trial. Jonathan Harris sat at his table, his mind racing, but there was something different in his eyes now, hope. He had always thought of himself as untouchable, a man whose wealth and influence could shield him from any danger. But now, it was not his lawyer or his wealth that could save him, it was Maya, the young woman he had never even noticed until this moment. His lawyer had abandoned him, and in that moment of crisis, it was Maya who had stepped forward, who had put her own life on the line to help him. She had exposed the flaw in the case against him, a flaw that no one else had seen. As he sat in the courtroom, Jonathan couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude toward Maya. She was just a janitor, a worker in the building, yet she had done something his high-priced lawyer could not. She had saved him. The judge entered the room, her footsteps echoing in the stillness, and the tension in the room heightened. All eyes were on her as she took her seat and addressed the court. "We will now review the new evidence presented by Miss Maya Williams," she announced. The murmurs in the room grew louder, and Jonathan could hear the disbelief in the whispers of the spectators. How could this be happening? How could a janitor be the one to turn the tide of such a high-profile case? The judge motioned for the prosecution and defense to review the document Maya had presented. The court clerk handed over the folded piece of paper that Maya had given the judge the day before. As they read through the clause, the room fell into a stunned silence. The prosecution exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the implications of what they were reading. The defense team looked up from the paper, their eyes wide with shock. The clause Maya had uncovered was a game changer, one that could prove Jonathan's innocence. It stated that the merger agreement, which was at the heart of the case, contained a loophole that could clear Jonathan's name and absolve him of the charges. The room was still, as the judge scanned the paper once more. "This changes everything," she finally said. "We need to investigate this further, but for now, I am suspending the trial." A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Some of the jurors looked relieved, while others seemed bewildered by the sudden turn of events. Jonathan, however, couldn't believe what he was hearing. The trial, which had seemed like an inevitable defeat for him, was now at a standstill. It was Maya who had brought this to light. Maya, who had saved him from certain ruin. He turned to look at her, and for the first time, he truly saw her. She wasn't just the janitor who cleaned the floors. She wasn't just someone who was invisible in the world of the powerful. She had become his savior, his protector. Maya, on the other hand, stood in the back of the room, her heart racing as she took in the scene. She had done it, she had found the key to Jonathan's freedom, and in doing so, she had changed the course of the trial. But as the attention in the courtroom shifted to the legal teams and the judge, Maya felt a sense of unease. She had stepped into a world she never imagined she would be part of. She had stood up for what was right, and now she was being recognized for it, but there was a part of her that wasn't sure how to process it. She had done what needed to be done, but that didn't mean she was comfortable with the attention she was getting. Jonathan's eyes never left her. He had been rescued from the edge of destruction, and now he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude toward this woman who had shown him the kind of courage he had never expected. He stood up, slowly making his way toward her. The room seemed to hold its breath as he approached Maya. "Miss Williams," he said, his voice low but filled with gratitude. "You saved me. I don't know how to thank you." Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. She had never expected this. She had never expected to be standing here, face to face with the very man she had helped. "I just did what I had to do," she replied quietly, her voice steady but humble. "It was the right thing." Jonathan took a deep breath, his voice thick with emotion. "No, you did more than that. You've given me a second chance. I don't know how to repay you for that." Maya shook her head. "I don't need anything from you," she said firmly. "I just did what I believed was right." There was a long pause, and then Jonathan extended his hand to her. "Thank you, Maya. Thank you for showing me that integrity doesn't depend on status." Maya looked at his hand, then slowly took it. The moment was brief, but in it, something shifted. Maya had done the impossible. She had defended a billionaire when no one else would, and now, in this moment, she realized that she was not invisible anymore. She had found her voice, and it had changed the course of someone's life. As they shook hands, the future seemed uncertain, but one thing was clear. Maya had found her place in a world she never imagined she would be part of, and the journey ahead would be hers to shape. The trial was temporarily suspended, but the aftermath of Maya Williams' revelation continued to ripple through the courthouse. The attorneys, the jurors, and the spectators all whispered in disbelief. How had the janitor found the missing piece of the puzzle? How had someone with no legal background, someone who had spent her days cleaning the floors, managed to save the billionaire from what seemed like certain defeat? As the room settled, Jonathan Harris sat back down at his table, his mind still racing. The shock was wearing off, and now, a deep sense of gratitude was starting to sink in. He had always believed in his wealth, his power, and his connections to keep him safe, but now, the truth was clear. It wasn't money that had saved him. It was Maya. She was the one who had stepped up when no one else would. She had done something that even his high-priced lawyer couldn't do. She had seen something the others missed, something that would turn the entire case around. Jonathan looked across the room at Maya, who stood quietly in the back. She had become the unlikely hero of this story. To him, she wasn't just the janitor anymore. She was someone who had saved his life, someone who had changed everything for him. He had no idea what to say to her, how to express the overwhelming gratitude he felt. All he knew was that he had to thank her, somehow. As the judge called for a brief recess, Jonathan stood up and walked toward Maya. His footsteps echoed in the quiet room. Maya looked up when she saw him approaching, her heart pounding. She had done what she believed was right, But standing in front of him now, she felt uncertain. She was used to being invisible, to being the one who went unnoticed in the world of the powerful. But today, everything had changed. Jonathan stopped in front of her. "Maya," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I don't know how to thank you. You've done something no one else could. You've saved me." Maya opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She had never imagined that the man who had once seemed untouchable, who had looked down on people like her, would be standing here, thanking her. "I just did what was right," she said, her voice steady but humble. "I couldn't stand by and watch you lose everything when I knew there was a way out." Jonathan nodded slowly, his expression one of deep admiration. "You've done more than just help me, Maya. You've shown me something I didn't know I was missing. You've reminded me what it means to have integrity, to do what's right even when no one else is looking." Maya shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, to being praised for something she had done. It felt foreign to her, but she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her chest. "I'm just a janitor," she said quietly. "I don't have a degree, I don't have connections, but I saw something, and I couldn't ignore it." Jonathan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "That's exactly it. You didn't need a degree or connections. You just needed the courage to act when it mattered. You did something no one else would have." He paused, taking a deep breath. "And for that, I'll be forever grateful." Maya felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She had never been one to show emotion, to let others see her vulnerabilities. But in this moment, standing face to face with Jonathan Harris, she couldn't help but feel a shift inside of her. "I didn't do it for you," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Jonathan's gaze softened. "I understand. But that doesn't make what you did any less extraordinary." There was a moment of silence between them, and for the first time, Maya didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, heard, and valued in a way she had never experienced before. As the recess ended and the courtroom began to fill with the sounds of shuffling papers and murmurs, Jonathan turned to leave, but not before giving Maya one last look. "Thank you, Maya. I'll never forget what you did for me." Maya nodded, her heart still racing, but her head clear. She had done what was right, and in doing so, she had not only saved Jonathan Harris but had also proved something to herself. She wasn't just a janitor, just someone who cleaned the floors. She was someone capable of making a difference, capable of standing up for what was right, no matter the odds. As she watched Jonathan walk away, a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She had done more than she had ever imagined, and for the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. The next day, the courtroom was filled with a sense of tension that was almost palpable. Maya Williams had no idea what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. She had already done more than she ever thought possible. The case had taken an unexpected turn, and now it was time for the next chapter. Jonathan Harris, the billionaire she had helped, was once again sitting at the defense table, but this time, there was something different about him. He no longer seemed like the powerful man who thought he could buy his way out of any situation. Now, he was just a man who had been given a second chance. As Maya entered the courtroom, she felt the weight of the eyes upon her. Whispers spread through the room as people realized that the janitor was once again present. She wasn't invisible anymore. She had done the impossible. And now, her place in this world had shifted. The trial resumed, but there was an air of uncertainty in the room. The evidence Maya had uncovered was still being examined, and no one knew what would happen next. The prosecution, which had once seemed so confident, now appeared on edge. The defense, while still cautious, seemed to have regained a glimmer of hope. Maya could feel the tension building in the courtroom as the judge prepared to announce the decision. Jonathan sat in his seat, his hands folded in front of him. He had been silent throughout the proceedings, his mind racing. He had come to realize that it wasn't just the case that had changed. He had changed. The events of the past few days had forced him to see things differently. He had always relied on his wealth, his influence, and his lawyer to handle his problems. But Maya had shown him that there was more to life than just money and power. There was integrity, there was courage, and there was the willingness to do what was right, even when it wasn't easy. As the judge finally addressed the room, the entire courtroom went silent. After reviewing the new evidence presented by Miss Maya Williams, "I have come to a decision," the judge said, her voice calm but firm. Maya held her breath, not knowing what to expect. The tension was unbearable. "In light of this new information, I am dismissing all charges against Mr. Harris. The case is closed." There was a moment of stunned silence before the courtroom erupted into a mix of shock and relief. Jonathan Harris sat frozen for a moment, unable to believe what he was hearing. He had won. He had been saved. The charges against him were gone, and it was all because of Maya. As the reality set in, Jonathan stood up, his legs unsteady as he made his way toward Maya. He didn't know what to say. His emotions were a mixture of gratitude, disbelief, and awe. Maya stood there, her hands trembling slightly, as she looked up at him. She had done it. She had saved him. But even as the victory washed over her, she couldn't help but feel a sense of discomfort. She wasn't used to being at the center of attention, to being recognized for something so monumental. Jonathan reached her, and without saying a word, he extended his hand to her. "Thank you," he said simply. "You've given me a second chance. I'll never forget what you've done for me." Maya looked at his hand, and for a moment, she hesitated. She wasn't sure how to process all of this, but then, something inside of her clicked. She had done what was right, and now she was being seen for it. She reached out and took his hand. "I did what anyone would have done," she said softly. "It was the right thing." Jonathan smiled, a smile that was full of gratitude and something more, something he hadn't felt in a long time: humility. "No, Maya, not anyone would have done it. You're the one who saw something that no one else did. You're the one who took action when it mattered." Maya looked at him, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to see her like this, to thank her for something so simple. But in that moment, standing in the courtroom with the charges against him dropped, Maya realized something. She wasn't just a janitor. She wasn't just someone who cleaned the floors and went unnoticed. She had power. She had courage. And now, she had the respect of the very man who once seemed untouchable. As the courtroom cleared and the crowds began to disperse, Jonathan turned to Maya one last time. "I want to offer you something," he said. "Anything you need. A job, a position, anything. You deserve more than this." Maya shook her head, her voice firm but gentle. "I don't need anything from you, Jonathan. I did this because it was the right thing to do. But thank you for seeing me, for recognizing what I did." Jonathan nodded, understanding. "You've already done more than enough, Maya. You've changed my life, and for that, I will be forever grateful." Maya smiled, a small but genuine smile. As she walked out of the courtroom, she felt something she hadn't felt in years' pride. She had done something no one expected, and in doing so, she had not only saved a man but had proven something to herself. She wasn't invisible anymore. Weeks passed since the trial, and Maya Williams was still processing everything that had happened. The life she had once known, the quiet, unnoticed existence of a janitor, felt like a distant memory. She had been thrust into a world of power and wealth, a world she never imagined she would be part of. But even with the accolades and the recognition, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had saved Jonathan Harris, the billionaire, from certain ruin. He had thanked her, offered her a job, even promised her anything she wanted. But Maya had refused. She didn't need his money, his position, or his charity. What she needed, what she had always needed, was to feel like she had control over her own life. The world around her had changed. People treated her differently now. The other employees at the courthouse, who once looked past her as she cleaned the floors, now greeted her with respect. The lawyers, the judges, even the security guards, everyone seemed to know her name. She had become a symbol of something more than just a janitor. But despite the newfound respect, Maya still felt like an outsider. She wasn't sure if the recognition was for who she truly was or if it was just because of the one thing she had done helping a billionaire. Jonathan Harris had offered her a position in his company, something that would guarantee her a life of comfort, even luxury. But Maya couldn't bring herself to accept. She wasn't interested in living off someone else's success. She wanted to build her own. One morning, as she walked into the building where she had once cleaned floors, Maya made a decision. She was done with being invisible, done with being someone's afterthought. She had already proven that she could change things. Now, it was time to prove it to herself. She walked straight to the office of Jonathan Harris, who was now running a multi-million-dollar corporation with the charges against him completely dropped. She had never seen him so relaxed, so at ease in his own skin. When he saw her walk into his office, he stood up, smiling. "Maya, I've been waiting for you. I knew you'd come around eventually. You know, you could be part of something much bigger than what you've been doing." Maya shook her head. "I appreciate everything you've done for me, Jonathan. But I didn't help you for a job or recognition. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and that's what I'm going to keep doing." Jonathan frowned, but he didn't argue. "So, what are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to start my own thing," Maya said, her voice steady with determination. "I'm going to create something that's mine, something that no one can take away from me." Jonathan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I get it, and I think that's exactly what you should do." He smiled again, this time with genuine admiration. "I'll support you, Maya. You've earned that." Maya smiled back, a weight lifting off her shoulders. "I don't need your support, Jonathan. I just need to believe in myself." As she walked out of his office, she felt lighter than she had in a long time. For the first time, she wasn't walking away from something. She was walking toward something. A future she could build on her own terms. She didn't know what that future would look like, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to let anyone define her again. She wasn't just a janitor, just a bystander in the lives of the rich and powerful. She was Maya Williams, a woman who had changed everything, and she was going to keep changing things. As the days passed, Maya's life began to take shape in a way she never thought possible. She started a small consulting firm, offering advice to people and businesses in need of direction, much like the way she had helped Jonathan. She was in control now, not just of her career, but of her destiny. The work wasn't easy, and there were times when it felt like she was starting over, but Maya wasn't afraid. She had already faced the impossible and come out on top. Now, all she had to do was keep moving forward, and as she did, the world began to notice her not as a janitor or a charity case, but as someone who had something valuable to offer. Maya Williams had found her place. It wasn't in the courts or the boardrooms of billionaires. It was in the quiet moments, the small decisions, the belief in herself that no one could take away. She was finally building the life she had always dreamed of. And for the first time, she realized that she didn't need anyone's permission to succeed. She was already doing it. Months had passed since Maya Williams made her decision to build her own future. She had left behind the life of a janitor, the world of shadows and sweeping floors, and ventured into a world where her voice mattered. With each passing day, Maya grew more confident in her decision to step into the unknown. She had started her own consulting firm, and though the road was far from easy, she was determined. Business was slow at first, but she had built something solid, something that was hers. People began to take notice. Word of mouth spread, and soon, Maya was helping small business owners, entrepreneurs, and even some larger corporations navigate their challenges. It was the same kind of help she had offered Jonathan Harris, but this time, it was for people who didn't have the luxury of millions of dollars to fall back on. They needed someone who understood what it was like to fight for a chance, to carve out a place in a world that often overlooked the little guy. But no matter how much progress she made, there was still one thing Maya couldn't shake. Every now and then, she would receive a call or an email from Jonathan Harris, or someone from his team. They were always kind, always offering support, and once, he even mentioned that he had a position waiting for her in his company if she ever changed her mind. The offers were tempting, but Maya always politely declined. She had learned something valuable in her time helping Jonathan. It wasn't just about having the power or the wealth. It was about having control over her own life, making her own decisions, and knowing that what she was building was the result of her own hard work, not someone else's influence. One day, while attending a networking event for small business owners, Maya was approached by a woman named Claire Thompson. Claire was a successful entrepreneur who ran a marketing agency in the heart of the city. She was sharp, confident, and well-connected, and she had heard of Maya's work through some mutual contacts. "I've been following your progress," Claire said, extending her hand. "I have to say, I'm impressed. You've built something remarkable." Maya shook her hand, smiling. "Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but I'm happy with how it's going. Claire's eyes sparkled with interest. Well, I have an offer for you. I've been looking for someone with your expertise, someone who understands the challenges of starting from scratch, but who also has the ability to guide others through their own struggles. My agency is expanding, and I need a consultant to help us launch a new project. The job would be yours if you want it. Maya's heart skipped a beat. The offer was legitimate. Claire was offering her a chance to work with one of the most successful agencies in the city. It was the kind of opportunity that most people would jump at. But for Maya, it felt different. She had spent so long building something for herself, something that she could call her own. She had fought for this freedom, this independence, and the idea of going back into the corporate world, even as a consultant, made her feel like she would be losing something precious. Thank you, Claire, Maya said after a long pause, her voice steady but thoughtful. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to have to turn it down. Claire raised an eyebrow, surprised. Really? You could be working with some of the best in the business. This is a chance to take your career to the next level. Maya nodded, understanding her point. I know, but I've learned something about myself over the past few months. I don't want to just be part of someone else's success. I want to create my own. I want to keep building something that's mine, on my terms. Claire studied her for a moment, then smiled. You know, I admire that. It takes guts to turn down an offer like this. But I get it. Keep doing what you're doing, Maya. You're on the right path. Maya smiled back, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. She had made the right choice, even if it wasn't the easiest one. She didn't need to follow in anyone's footsteps. She was creating her own path, one that was true to who she was. As she left the event that evening, Maya felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had made it. She had built something for herself, something that was worth more than money, more than prestige. It was her dream, her vision, and she was living it. For the first time in her life, Maya felt truly free. She had taken a chance, stood up for what was right, and never looked back. And now, as she stood on the precipice of even greater success, she knew one thing for sure. She had earned everything she had, and no one could take it away from her. As Maya Williams walked down the bustling city streets, she felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. Her business was thriving, her reputation solid, and the weight of uncertainty that had once followed her everywhere had now been replaced by the steady rhythm of progress. She had come a long way from the janitor who had been invisible in the halls of power. She was no longer just someone who cleaned up after others. Now, she was the one people came to for guidance, for insight, for help. And yet, despite the success and the acknowledgement, there was a nagging feeling that kept pulling at her. She wasn't sure what it was, but she knew it was there. She had built a life for herself, and for the first time, it felt like she was in control. But there were moments, rare, fleeting moments, when she felt as if something was missing. It wasn't the work. The work was fulfilling. It wasn't the money. She had more than enough to live comfortably. It was something deeper, something intangible. She had given up so much for this. She had sacrificed the simplicity of her old life for the complexity of this new world, and she often wondered if it had been worth it. One evening, after a long day of meetings and calls, Maya sat alone in her apartment. The city lights flickered below, but the room around her felt still. She had gotten used to the noise of the world, the constant buzz of people and activity, but tonight, it all felt distant, like it was happening somewhere far away. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, allowing herself a rare moment of quiet. She remembered the first time she had stood up for what was right, the first time she had spoken out in that courtroom. She remembered the look in Jonathan Harris's eyes when she had revealed the key evidence, the disbelief, the gratitude. It had been a turning point, not just for him, but for her. She had done something extraordinary, something no one expected, and for the first time, she had felt truly powerful. But that feeling of being seen, of making a difference, had faded. The world had moved on, and so had she. Her consulting business had grown, her clients trusted her, and her name was starting to carry weight in the circles that mattered. But there was still that question, lingering in the back of her mind. Was this really what she wanted? Was this the life she had imagined for herself? Or had she simply gotten caught up in the momentum of success, forgetting the reason she had started all of this in the first place? As she sat in her apartment, Maya began to reflect on the moments that had led her here. She thought about her decision to leave her old life behind, to take a chance on something new. She thought about the people who had tried to put her down, to tell her she wasn't good enough, and how she had risen above them. She thought about the way she had found her voice and used it to change the course of a man's life, to right a wrong, to prove that even the smallest person could make a difference. It had been hard. There were times when she felt like giving up, but she had kept going, and now she had everything she had dreamed of. But what about the dreams she hadn't had yet? What about the things she hadn't imagined? Maya knew that the life she had built was a result of her choices, her hard work, and her belief in herself. But she also knew that there was more to life than just achieving success. There was meaning, there was purpose, and there was the chance to impact others in ways she hadn't thought of yet. The world had opened up to her in ways she had never expected, and now she was ready to take the next step. Maya stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city skyline. The world was at her feet, but she knew that what mattered most wasn't the buildings or the money or the recognition. It was the people. It was the relationships, the connections, the impact she could have. And with that realization, Maya felt a new sense of purpose settle into her heart. She wasn't just going to help businesses grow or help people succeed. She was going to use her position, her influence, and her voice to create change, real, lasting change. She had proven to herself that she could make a difference, and now she was going to take that power and use it for something greater. The path ahead was uncertain, and there would be challenges along the way. But Maya was no longer afraid. She had faced the impossible before, and now she was ready for whatever came next. She had built a life on her own terms, and she wasn't going to stop now. Maya Williams had found her voice, and with it, she was going to change the world. It had been a year since Maya Williams had stepped into the world of the powerful. Her consulting business had flourished, and her reputation had grown with every success story she helped to create. Her name was becoming synonymous with integrity, and those who once saw her as nothing more than a janitor now turned to her for advice, for guidance, and for solutions. Yet, despite the success and the recognition, there was still one thing that weighed heavily on her heart. She couldn't escape the feeling that, despite all she had achieved, something was still missing. Maya had built a life, but the one thing she hadn't done was truly make a lasting impact on those who needed it most. She had helped businesses grow, yes, but had she truly changed lives? Had she given back in the way she had always dreamed of doing? The question lingered in her mind, haunting her in moments of quiet reflection. One evening, after a full day of meetings, Maya sat at her desk staring at her computer screen. The glowing lights of the city outside her window were a reminder of how far she had come, but they also felt distant, like she was looking at a world she no longer fully belonged to. Her phone buzzed on the desk, a message from Jonathan Harris. "Maya, I've been thinking about our last conversation. You've got something special, and I think it's time for you to use it in a bigger way. I have an idea, and I want you to be a part of it. Let me know when you're free to talk." Maya felt a stirring in her chest. Jonathan had become a mentor, not just a business associate. He had watched her grow and had always been there with encouragement, even when she doubted herself. She typed a quick reply, setting up a meeting. The next morning, she walked into Jonathan's office, where he was waiting for her. His office was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. The luxury was undeniable, but what Maya admired most about Jonathan was how grounded he had remained. He didn't wear his wealth as armor. Instead, he used it as a tool for change, for making things better. "Maya, I've been looking at your progress, and I'm proud of what you've accomplished," Jonathan began, his voice steady. "But I think you're ready for the next step. It's time for you to expand your reach, to start using your influence for something bigger than business." Maya raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" she asked. Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I've been involved with a few philanthropic projects, but I think we can do more. I know you want to make a real difference, and I think we can build something together, something that doesn't just change businesses but changes lives. I'm talking about using your expertise to build a foundation that can help people, communities who need real guidance, not just business advice. We can provide mentorship, coaching, even financial support to those who don't have the resources but have the potential." Maya was silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always wanted to make a difference, But the idea of running a foundation was something she had never considered. It felt too big, too daunting, and yet, it felt right. I don't know, Maya said slowly. I've always been so focused on business. I've never thought about doing something like that. Jonathan smiled, understanding. I get it. But think about it. All the work you've done so far has been about success, about achieving goals, meeting targets, building your reputation. But now, you have the chance to create something that lasts, something that helps others achieve what you've achieved. You can give back in ways you never imagined. Maya thought about his words. She had built her success on her terms, but this was different. This was about something greater than herself. It was about lifting others up, about creating opportunities where none existed before. The idea of starting a foundation, of helping people who truly needed it, filled her with a new kind of excitement. She felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't about business or success anymore. It was about making a real difference. Okay, Maya said, her voice steady but full of conviction. Let's do it. Let's start the foundation. Jonathan's face lit up with a smile. I knew you'd say that. I'll be here to support you every step of the way. But this is your vision, Maya. This is your chance to change the world. As Maya left Jonathan's office that day, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. This was the next step, the step that would truly define her legacy. She wasn't just going to build businesses, she was going to help build lives. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be challenges ahead, but Maya was no stranger to challenges. She had faced adversity before, and had come out on top. Now, she was ready for something bigger. With a newfound sense of determination, Maya Williams was going to change the world not for the wealthy or the powerful, but for those who needed it the most, and she would do it on her terms. As the foundation began to take shape, Maya Williams found herself at a crossroads. The initial excitement of starting something so impactful had slowly morphed into a heavy realization of what it truly meant to build something from the ground up. It was one thing to guide people in business, but it was another to help those who were struggling in ways that were far beyond financial struggles. The foundation had become her new mission, her new purpose. It was a challenge unlike anything she had ever faced. She knew she had the drive, but could she truly change lives in the way she had hoped? Could she provide real opportunities to people who had never been given a chance? Her days were now filled with meetings, partnerships, and planning. She had built a network of mentors, social workers, and experts who could provide resources, education, and advice to those who needed it most. But as the months went by, Maya started to notice something unexpected, a sense of doubt creeping into her mind. It wasn't about the mission was clear. It was about whether she could truly make the difference she dreamed of. She had always believed that hard work and dedication could lead to success. But helping people who had been overlooked by society, people who had been failed by the system, felt like a much bigger task. And then one afternoon, as Maya was going over the foundation's budget with her team, she received a call that changed everything. The voice on the other end was calm, but there was an urgency to it. Maya, the voice said, we need your help. There's a young woman here, and she's in a situation that we can't ignore. She's been through things that no one should ever experience, and right now, she's falling through the cracks. Maya's heart sank. She had heard stories like this before, but hearing the words now, in this moment, with everything she had worked for on the line, made it feel real. The woman on the phone explained that this young girl, a teenager, had come from an abusive home and had been abandoned in the system. She had bounced from one foster home to another, never finding stability or safety. Maya's mind raced. She had never expected to deal with cases like this, not in the way she had been preparing for. I'll be there, Maya said, before even fully understanding what she was committing to. That evening, Maya drove to the shelter where the girl was staying. She arrived to find a girl who could barely meet her eyes, someone who had seen too much for her young age. Maya sat down next to her, trying her best to be calm, to offer the stability that was missing in the girl's life. I'm here to help, Maya said gently. Whatever you need, we'll make sure you're taken care of. The girl looked at her, hesitated for a moment, and then spoke. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Maya could see the walls the girl had built, the walls that years of neglect had forced her to put up. Because you deserve more, Maya said. her voice firm with the conviction she had found in herself so long ago. "You deserve a chance, and I'm going to make sure you get one." That evening, as Maya left the shelter, she felt a weight she hadn't felt before. This was no longer about building a successful foundation or climbing the ladder to success. This was about something much deeper. It was about making sure people, real people, had a shot at a better life, no matter where they came from or what they had been through. Maya knew the road ahead would be difficult. She would face obstacles, financial challenges, and even opposition. But in that moment, she also knew that she couldn't turn back. The foundation wasn't just a business, it was a lifeline, and she had made a promise to herself, and to that girl, that she would not let them down. Over the next few weeks, Maya threw herself into the work, helping not just that girl, but others who had been failed by the system. She began to see the true impact of what she was doing. It wasn't just about financial success anymore. It was about changing lives, one person at a time. She reached out to new partners, organizations, and even local governments, pushing for resources and policies that would make a real difference. As she spent more time working with these young people, helping them find their footing and reclaim their futures, Maya found herself feeling more fulfilled than she had in years. This was the difference she had been searching for. This was the real work. This was what she was meant to do. And with that, Maya Williams realized that her journey wasn't just about success. It was about something far more important, giving people the chance to succeed, no matter their past. She had come full circle, from a janitor to a leader, from someone overlooked to someone who was changing the world. And for the first time in a long time, she could honestly say that she had found her purpose. Months passed, and the foundation that Maya Williams had established began to grow and take shape. The first few steps had been the hardest. She had been unsure, not knowing if her dream would really make the difference she hoped it would. But now, as she walked through the halls of the new building her foundation had opened, she could see the fruits of her labor. The walls, once bare, now held success stories from the people whose lives had been transformed by her vision. Young adults who had once been caught in the system, feeling lost and forgotten, now stood tall with their heads high, ready to pursue their own dreams. Maya was seeing firsthand the power of what she had built. As the foundation's programs expanded, she began working directly with individuals, helping them find jobs, build their careers, and even re-establish connections with their families. The work was exhausting, and the challenges were real. There were setbacks, moments when the foundation's funds seemed stretched too thin, and times when the system worked against them, not with them. But each victory, no matter how small, made it all worthwhile. Maya had learned to navigate the complex web of nonprofit work, building relationships with corporate sponsors, negotiating partnerships, and ensuring that every cent of the foundation's funding went directly to those who needed it most. One afternoon, as Maya was preparing for a major gala to raise funds for the foundation, she received an unexpected call. It was Jonathan Harris, and his voice was unlike it had ever been before, urgent, serious. "Maya," he said, "I need to talk to you. I've been following the work you're doing, and I'm impressed. But there's something I need to tell you, something important." Maya felt a tightening in her chest. Jonathan had been an unwavering supporter of her work from the beginning, but she could tell by the tone in his voice that this wasn't just another congratulatory call. "What's going on?" she asked. "It's about the foundation," Jonathan began. "I've been contacted by a few of my business associates, and there's a situation brewing. It's about the work you're doing with the communities that have been overlooked for so long. Some powerful people are noticing your success, and it's starting to ruffle feathers. You've been making a real impact, and some people don't like it." Maya's heart raced as she listened, unsure of what Jonathan meant. "What are you saying?" she asked. Jonathan's voice softened. "I'm saying that there are going to be challenges ahead. I'm worried for your safety, Maya. There are people who don't want to see this kind of change. They don't want the system to be exposed for what it's been doing." Maya was silent for a moment, processing what he had said. The reality of the situation began to set in. She had known that the foundation's work would never be easy, but she had always believed that she could overcome any obstacle. This was different, though. These weren't just financial challenges or logistical problems. These were people who had power, who could pull strings, and who could make things difficult for her in ways she couldn't even imagine. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the fear she felt inside. Jonathan hesitated. "Maya, I've always told you that you have the strength to make a difference. And you do. But I want you to be prepared. Whatever you're about to face, don't let them intimidate you. You have a right to fight for what's right. You've come too far to back down now." His words echoed in her mind long after she hung up the phone. Maya wasn't afraid of a challenge, but this was a different kind of challenge. She had built the foundation from the ground up, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. She knew what she was doing was right, and she would continue to do it, no matter the opposition. The next few weeks were filled with tension. The gala went off without a hitch, raising more money than Maya had anticipated. The guests were generous, and the support for her foundation was overwhelming. But behind the scenes, there was a growing sense of unease. Maya had learned that the people who were pushing against her weren't just anonymous figures, they were individuals with power, people who had influence over the very systems she was trying to change. She wasn't just up against the challenges of a nonprofit. She was up against an establishment that didn't want the status quo to be shaken. Maya spent long nights strategizing with her team, planning how they could continue to operate despite the looming threats. She spoke with lawyers, with advisors, and with allies who believed in her cause. She wasn't going to back down. She would continue to fight for those who had no voice, and she would stand up to those who tried to silence her. Every obstacle that was placed in her path only fueled her determination to push harder, to fight smarter, and to never stop believing in the power of change. In the end, Maya realized that the fight she was in was not just about money or influence. It was about creating a future where people had the opportunity to succeed, no matter their background or past. And that was a fight worth every struggle. As she looked out the window of her office, Maya knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready. She had built her life on her own terms, and now she would build a future for others, one where they could stand tall, too. The days following Maya Williams' decision to push forward with the foundation were a whirlwind of strategy, action, and unforeseen challenges. She had come so far, yet the stakes had never been higher. Every day brought new obstacles, from funding issues to mounting pressure from those who resisted her vision. Maya had known from the start that her work would face resistance, but the reality was tougher than she had ever imagined. Some days felt like a battle she wasn't sure she could win, but each time she questioned herself, she reminded herself of the reasons she had started this in the first place, the young girl she had helped, the countless others who had been forgotten by the system. Her foundation was more than just an organization. It was the hope she had carried for so long, and she couldn't afford to let it fall apart. One afternoon, as Maya sat in her office reviewing financials, a knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to find Jonathan Harris standing in the doorway, his usual confident demeanor now replaced with a serious expression. "Maya," he said, stepping inside, "I know things have been tough lately. I've been hearing rumors about the pressure you're facing." Maya sighed, her hands resting on the edge of her desk. "It's been harder than I thought it would be," she admitted. "The people who are against what I'm doing, they're not just trying to stop the foundation. They're trying to destroy everything I've worked for. And it's getting harder to keep everything together." Jonathan stepped closer, his voice firm. "You've done more than just start a foundation, Maya. You've started a movement, and movements always face resistance. The question is not whether you'll face opposition, it's how you respond to it." Maya looked at him, feeling a surge of gratitude. Jonathan had been her ally from the beginning, but hearing him say those words, seeing his confidence in her, was the encouragement she needed. She stood up, her resolve hardening. "I know you're right," she said, her voice steady. "I can't let them win. I've come this far, and I won't back down now." Jonathan smiled. "That's exactly the spirit I knew you had in you." The next few weeks brought even more tension. A group of powerful individuals, seeing the growing influence of Maya's foundation, began targeting her with coordinated efforts to undermine her work. The attacks were subtle at first, negative articles in the media, small but damaging rumors, and backdoor attempts to discredit her leadership. But Maya wasn't easily shaken. She had faced adversity before, and now, she was ready to confront it head-on. She met with her legal team, strengthened the foundation's financial backing, and sought new partnerships to ensure her cause wouldn't be derailed. Every day felt like a battle, But with each challenge, Maya grew stronger. And soon, it became clear that her opponents had underestimated her. Maya wasn't just a woman with a foundation, she was a force to be reckoned with. At a critical moment, when the pressure was at its peak, Maya took a bold step. She called a press conference, something she had never done before. She had kept a low profile for most of the foundation's existence, preferring to let her work speak for itself. But now, she realized that it was time for her to speak up. As the cameras flashed and the microphones were directed toward her, Maya took a deep breath and addressed the public. "I know there are those who are trying to silence the work we're doing," she began, her voice clear and strong. "They think that because we don't have the same power or influence as they do, they can stop us. But I'm here to tell you that we are stronger than they realize. This foundation isn't just about helping people, it's about changing the system that has held people back for far too long. And we're not going anywhere." The room was still as Maya's words sank in. She had never spoken so openly, so passionately, and for the first time, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She wasn't just defending the foundation, she was defending everything it represented. She was fighting for the people who had no voice, for the ones who had been ignored by the world. When the press conference ended, Maya felt a rush of energy that she hadn't felt in weeks. She knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had proven to herself, and to the world, that she wasn't going to back down. The foundation continued to grow, despite the challenges. Maya's leadership became more widely recognized, and the support for her cause multiplied. But more importantly, she had earned the respect of those who had once doubted her. The people she was fighting for, the ones who had been neglected, abandoned, and forgotten, were beginning to believe in themselves too. They saw that someone cared, that someone was willing to fight for them, and that belief began to spread like wildfire. Maya's journey had come full circle. She had gone from being a janitor to a leader of change, from being unseen to being a voice for those who had never had one. And though the challenges would never fully disappear, she now knew that the only way to truly lose was to stop fighting. The work she was doing was too important, too necessary. And now, with each passing day, the world was starting to change. For Maya, there was no turning back. The fight had only just begun. As Maya stood at the front of the grand auditorium, looking out at the crowd gathered before her, she felt a sense of pride she had never experienced before. The foundation she had fought so hard to build, the cause she had poured her heart into, was no longer just an idea. It had become a movement. The people in the room were there because of the impact her work had on their lives, and they were all part of something larger than themselves. Maya had not just built a successful nonprofit organization. She had created a community, a place where people could find the support, the resources, and the hope they needed to rise above their circumstances. She had done this with hard work, resilience, and an unwavering belief that every person, no matter their background, deserved a chance to succeed. As she stepped up to the podium, the applause that greeted her was overwhelming. She had learned to stand in the spotlight, to accept the recognition, but this time, it was different. This was the culmination of years of struggle, of fighting against the odds, of refusing to let the system break her. She had not only changed the lives of the people in the room, but she had also changed her own. Maya took a deep breath and looked out at the sea of faces. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady. "Thank you for believing in what we're doing. Thank you for being part of this. What we've built here is bigger than any one person. It's about all of us coming together to make a difference, to lift each other up." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "When I first started this journey, I had no idea where it would lead. I didn't know if it was even possible to make the kind of change I wanted to see. But with every challenge, every setback, I learned that it's not about how many times you fall, it's about how many times you get back up and keep going." The crowd nodded in agreement, the energy in the room palpable. Maya smiled, the weight of the past few years lifting off her shoulders. She had been through so much, but now, standing in front of these people, she realized that it had all been worth it. She had not just built a foundation, she had built a legacy. We've faced opposition, we've faced struggles, and we've had moments where we weren't sure if we could keep going, she continued. But we're still here. And we're only getting started. Maya's words resonated in the room. The challenges hadn't gone away, but they had only made her stronger, more determined. The fight was far from over. But now she had an army of people behind her, people who shared her vision, who understood the importance of giving back, of creating opportunities for those who had been left behind. This foundation, this movement, isn't just about giving handouts. It's about giving people the tools they need to succeed on their own. It's about empowering people to take control of their own destinies, to break the cycles that have held them back for generations, Maya said, her voice strong. And this is just the beginning. The work we're doing now is laying the foundation for the future. We are changing the system, one step at a time, and we won't stop until every person who needs help gets it. The applause grew louder as Maya finished her speech, but she knew that the real work was just beginning. This moment, this recognition, was the reward for the countless hours she had put into building the foundation, but it was also a reminder of how much more there was to do. Maya knew that the road ahead would still be filled with challenges. There would always be those who tried to stop her, who didn't want to see the change she was creating. But she had proven to herself, and to everyone else, that she wasn't afraid of the fight. She had faced the impossible before, and she would face it again if necessary. Because for Maya, the most important thing was not the accolades or the recognition. It was the impact she was making on the lives of those who needed it the most. She had given them a chance. And, in doing so, she had given herself a purpose. Maya stepped down from the podium, the weight of her words still lingering in the air. She walked through the crowd, shaking hands, listening to the stories of the people who had been touched by her work. And as she did, she realized that this was what it was all about. The foundation wasn't just her creation. It was a living, breathing entity that belonged to everyone who had been a part of it. She had changed the world, not just for herself, but for all of them. And that was the legacy she had always wanted to leave. As Maya walked out of the auditorium that evening, she looked up at the stars above, a feeling of peace settling in her chest. She had done it. She had built something real, something lasting. And no matter what came next, she knew one thing for sure: she was ready to keep going. Maya Williams had become a force of change, and the world was a better place for it. In this inspiring tale of perseverance and transformation, Maya Williams rises from the shadows of her past as a janitor to become a leading force in her community, changing lives and making a lasting impact. Her journey begins with a single act of courage that shakes the very foundation of power, proving that even those who are overlooked can make a difference. As she builds a foundation that empowers the forgotten, Maya faces obstacles, opposition, and self-doubt, but she never gives up. Along the way, she learns that true success is not measured by wealth or accolades, but by the difference she makes in the lives of others. Maya's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of standing up for what is right. In this powerful Black story, Maya's path intersects with others who have been ignored and marginalized by society, showing how one person can inspire change. As her foundation grows, so does the impact of her work, touching the lives of many, helping them break free from the systems that have held them back for so long. This Black story is not just about a woman's journey to success, but about how her actions create a ripple effect that changes an entire community. Through unwavering dedication and the courage to speak out, Maya proves that real change is possible, even in the face of adversity. This story is a celebration of the strength of Black voices, showing how they can challenge the status quo and create a better future for all. From humble beginnings to making a global impact, Maya's journey is a shining example of how Black stories are shaping the future and inspiring generations to come.